The most terrifying part of that night wasn't the men we saw. It was the realization that they had been watching us long before we ever noticed them. Even now, years later, I still think about how close we came to finding out what they really wanted. And every time I replay those events in my head, I arrive at the same conclusion. If I had fallen asleep that night, things could have ended very differently. I was 21 years old when it happened. It was my first hunting trip, and honestly, I didn't even want to go. My friends Anthony, Christian, Tom, and Tom's girlfriend Diana had invited me multiple times before. Anthony was especially persistent. Hunting was practically his favorite thing in the world, and after turning him down several times, I finally agreed. The trip took place somewhere in the Colorado wilderness. I couldn't even remember the exact park anymore, only that it felt incredibly isolated. We packed 2 large tents, sleeping bags, food and drinks for 2 days, and enough hunting gear to make it clear everyone except me knew exactly what they were doing. Anthony handed me a hunting rifle before we left. I stared at it awkwardly. I couldn't have told you the model or caliber. To me, it was just a gun. About halfway through the drive, I quietly made a decision. I wasn't going to shoot anything. The idea of killing an animal for sport never sat right with me. I understood people hunted for different reasons, but personally, I couldn't bring myself to pull the trigger on something that wanted to stay alive just as badly as I did. I kept that thought to myself. After several hours on the road, Anthony finally pulled into a small parking area. The lot was completely empty. No other vehicles, no hikers, no campers, nothing. At the time, that seemed peaceful. Looking back, it feels unsettling. We unloaded our gear and hiked roughly a mile into the woods. The deeper we walked, the quieter everything became. Towering pines surrounded us on all sides. The air smelled damp and earthy, and the sunlight struggled to reach the forest floor. Eventually, we found a clearing and set up camp. As soon as the tents were standing, Anthony launched into a long speech about hunting techniques, animal behavior, and tracking methods. Everyone listened seriously, everyone except me. Trying to lighten the mood, I joked, "Wouldn't it make more sense to stop talking if you don't want to scare away whatever you're hunting?" Anthony didn't laugh. His face tightened immediately. I could tell I'd hit a nerve. From that point on, I mostly kept quiet. At the time, it felt like an awkward start to a weekend. I had no idea that normality was already slipping away. The strange encounter happened only a few hours later. At first, the day was uneventful. We moved through the woods in a loose line, following Anthony's lead. The forest stretched endlessly in every direction. Every now and then we'd stop to examine tracks or listen for movement. The deeper we traveled, the more isolated everything felt. Then we saw them. 3 men. They appeared suddenly between the trees ahead of us. For a moment, nobody spoke. The men looked rough in a way that immediately made my stomach tighten. All 3 were large and heavily built. Their clothes were filthy. Long strands of greasy hair hung around their faces. Their skin looked weathered and dirty, as if they had been living outdoors for a very long time. What disturbed me most was the way they stared. Not aggressively, not friendly, just watching, silently. One by one, they gave small nods as we passed. Nobody returned the gesture. Nobody even said hello. We simply kept walking. Only after they disappeared behind us did anyone speak. "Those guys were weird," Christian muttered. We all agreed. If we'd seen them in town, maybe it would have been nothing more than an uncomfortable interaction. But this wasn't town. This was deep wilderness, miles from civilization, miles from help, and the parking lot had been empty. So where had they come from? Where were they going? The questions lingered as we continued our hunt. Thankfully, they never appeared again. At least, that's what we thought. As afternoon faded toward evening, Anthony finally managed to shoot a deer. No elk, just a deer. The sound of the rifle echoed through the trees and disappeared into the distance. The group celebrated while I stood awkwardly nearby. Dragging the animal back to camp took hours. By the time we returned, the sun was already sinking behind the trees. Then came the part one wanted no involvement in. Anthony and Tom began skinning and gutting the deer. I watched for only a few seconds before turning away. The entire process made me feel sick. Still, I had to admit something. Anthony knew what he was doing. He'd packed everything, even burger buns. A short while later, venison burgers were cooking over the fire. The smell drifted through camp while darkness slowly swallowed the forest around us. For a little while, things felt normal again. We sat around the fire talking. the sky above us filled with stars. The forest remained silent, too silent. Eventually, exhaustion caught up with everyone. We crawled into our tents shortly after dark. The fire continued crackling outside. Anthony and Christian fell asleep almost immediately. I wasn't so lucky. I tossed and turned inside my sleeping bag for what felt like forever. The unfamiliar ground pressed against my back. Every sound seemed amplified. And sometime around 2 hours later, while staring into darkness, I heard something outside. Footsteps. Slow, careful, moving toward our tent. The footsteps stopped directly outside. My body instantly tensed. For a second, I considered calling out Tom's name. Then another thought entered my mind. What if it wasn't Tom? I stayed completely still. The inside of the tent was pitch black. I could hear Anthony breathing nearby. Christian snored softly. Outside, silence returned. Then came a sound that made my stomach drop. The zipper. Someone was opening our tent. Very slowly. The noise seemed impossibly loud. I immediately turned my head and shut my eyes, pretending to be asleep. Every muscle in my body locked up. The zipper continued moving, then stopped. I sensed someone standing there, watching, waiting. Seconds passed, maybe longer. The silence felt endless. Finally, the zipper closed again. Whoever it was stepped away. I listened carefully. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The footsteps moved farther from our tent, toward Tom and Diana's. At first, relief washed over me. I convinced myself there had to be a simple explanation. Maybe Tom had come outside. Maybe Diana had. Maybe they were checking whether everyone was asleep before sneaking off for some privacy. The explanation seemed reasonable enough. Eventually, I even started feeling embarrassed for panicking. Then an idea crossed my mind. I could scare them. A harmless joke. I waited roughly 5 minutes before quietly climbing from my sleeping bag. Anthony and Christian remained asleep. Carefully, I unzipped the tent and stepped outside. The night air felt cold against my face. The campfire had burned down to glowing embers. Beyond the clearing, darkness swallowed everything. I slowly approached Tom and Diana's tent. The forest seemed unnaturally quiet. No wind, no insects, no distant animals, nothing. As I got closer, I noticed something strange. Their tent zipper was open, not partially, completely open. I frowned. That didn't make sense. If they wanted privacy, why leave the tent wide open? A knot formed in my stomach. Every instinct suddenly told me something was wrong. I moved closer, one careful step at a time. The ground crunched softly beneath my boots. When I finally reached the opening and looked inside, my brain struggled to process what I was seeing. There were 2 men inside the tent. Not Tom, not Diana. 2 men, both crouched over Diana. For a split second, everything froze. My heart seemed to stop. The moonlight revealed enough of their faces for recognition to hit me instantly. I'd seen them before, earlier that day, in the woods. They were 2 of the 3 strange men we'd passed during the hunt, and they were not supposed to be anywhere near our campsite. The shock exploded through me. Before I could think, before I could even understand what was happening, I opened my mouth and screamed, as loud as I possibly could. The sound ripped through the darkness, and the entire forest seemed to wake up. The reaction was immediate. Anthony burst from our tent, clutching his rifle. Christian was right behind him. "What happened?" Anthony shouted. I pointed toward Tom and Diana's tent, barely able to form words. The 2 men inside heard the commotion and instantly bolted. They rushed out of the tent and sprinted toward the trees. For a brief second, the moonlight illuminated their faces. There was no doubt. They were the same men we'd encountered earlier. Anthony raised his rifle. Tom emerged moments later, confused and disoriented. A pair of warning shots cracked through the night. The gunfire echoed across the forest. The fleeing men disappeared into the darkness. And then something happened that terrified us even more than the intruders themselves. For a moment after the shots, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The woods seemed frozen. Then movement appeared everywhere. Not one direction, not 2 directions. Everywhere. Bushes rustled. Branches snapped. Dark figures emerged from hiding places behind trees and thick undergrowth. Dozens of shapes. Or at least it felt like dozens. Men started running in different directions through the forest. Some had been crouched behind bushes. Others had been hidden behind tree trunks. A few seemed frighteningly close to our camp. The realization hit all of us at the same time. We hadn't been dealing with 2 men. We'd been surrounded. The people watching us were far more numerous than we'd ever imagined. Fear spread through the group like electricity. Anthony shouted for everyone to stay together. The forest erupted with crashing footsteps as the hidden figures fled deeper into the darkness. Within seconds they were gone, but the knowledge remained. They had been there, watching, waiting, listening. For how long? An hour? Several hours? The entire evening? Nobody knew. We rushed into Tom and Diana's tent. Neither of them responded normally. Both seemed strangely unconscious. Tom's eyes opened briefly, but he couldn't focus. Diana barely reacted at all. Panic set in. We shook them, called their names, tried everything. Nothing worked. Neither appeared injured, but something was clearly wrong. Anthony believed they had been injected with some kind of tranquilizer. At the time, it seemed like the only explanation. Whatever had happened inside that tent, it had left them unable to respond. And now we were trapped in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by darkness, with no idea whether those men would return. Every shadow beyond the camp suddenly felt alive. Every tree seemed to conceal another watcher. Waiting there for Tom and Diana to wake up felt longer than any half hour I've ever experienced. None of us took our eyes off the tree line, and every passing minute deepened a single terrifying question. What exactly had those people planned to do with them? Eventually, after what felt like an eternity, Tom and Diana began recovering. Their movements were sluggish. Their speech was confused. Neither could fully explain what had happened. At that point, we didn't care. We had one priority: leave. Immediately. Nobody discussed staying until sunrise. Nobody suggested packing carefully. The hunting trip was over. The moment Tom and Diana could walk, we grabbed what we could and started moving. The journey back to the parking lot remains one of the most frightening experiences of my life. The forest was completely dark. Our flashlights cut narrow tunnels through the blackness, revealing only a few feet ahead at a time. Every snapped twig behind us sounded like pursuit. Every rustling branch made us turn around. Nobody walked alone. Nobody drifted from the group. We stayed tightly packed together as we hurried through the woods. The mile-long hike that had seemed easy earlier now felt endless. Each minute stretched painfully. The silence was somehow worse than noise, because silence left room for imagination. And my imagination kept returning to those hidden figures. How many had there really been? 10? 20? More? How long had they been observing us before we noticed anything? Had they followed us from the moment we entered the woods? Had they watched us eat dinner around the fire? Watched us laugh? Watched us fall asleep? The questions kept piling up. None of us had answers. Eventually, through the darkness, we spotted something that felt almost miraculous. The parking lot. The sight of our vehicle brought overwhelming relief. We piled inside faster than I thought possible. Doors slammed. Locks clicked. And only then did I feel like I could breathe again. As Anthony drove away, the forest disappeared behind us. None of us looked back. To this day, I still don't know who those people were. Maybe they lived deep in those woods. Maybe they belonged to some isolated community hidden far from civilization. Maybe there was an explanation far less dramatic than the one our terrified minds imagined that night. Or maybe there wasn't. What I do know is this: a group of strangers surrounded our campsite while we slept. Two of them entered a tent occupied by Tom and Diana. And if I hadn't been awake when those footsteps approached our tent, none of us can say what might have happened next. Years have passed since that trip, but I still remember the sound of that zipper opening in the darkness. Slow, deliberate, careful, the sound of someone checking whether we were asleep. And sometimes that's the detail that unsettles me the most, because it suggests they weren't acting on impulse. They had a plan. And for reasons I'll probably never understand, that plan failed. The only thing any of us know for certain is that we all made it out of those woods alive. Whatever those men intended to do that night remains hidden somewhere in the darkness of that Colorado forest.